In a study conducted in 2020, a sample of League of Legends players were subjected to a short challenge where they'd eliminate as many targets as possible. One group underwent 15 minutes of intense cardiovascular exercise just shortly before the challenge began, while the other group did no exercise. What they found was that those who participated in the intense exercise before the task actually performed significantly better than those who didn't. In broad terms, exercise improved gaming performance. What I find fascinating about this is that most of the time gaming and exercise are considered like an inverse relationship. I mean, when you try to picture a gamer in your mind, chances are you're not thinking of some ripped Giga Chad holding a controller. If anything, it's the opposite. But this result argues that it doesn't have to be like that. It says that there's actually a complementary relationship between the two. So I decided to see if this study is actually true for myself. I gathered my stuff and went outside. For the next 5 days, I'll be doing various exercises from jogging to intense weight training just before a session of gaming. A different exercise every day to see which one actually gives me the best results. Obviously, we all know the benefits of exercise on the physical side of things, but the mental side is kind of a mystery, at least for me. So first up, I'm doing just a light jog for 15 minutes, just moderate exercise. It's not meant to be too intense just yet. And then after that, I'm gonna rest for like 20 minutes, just get my heart rate down back to normal, and then I'm gonna play some ranked games of Rocket League to see how it goes. So to test my performance in game, I was considering doing like specific challenges in each game, like training packs for Rocket League or the shooting range in Valorant. But I wanted to see how the exercise would translate to like my overall in-game performance. So because of that, I'll be playing like full-length ranked games after each exercise. Nice. So after 20 minutes of rest, I went ahead and played some ranked in Rocket League. I also decided it would make sense to experiment with this in multiple games. So a few hours later, I went back for a jog again and then played some Valorant after. I've played Rocket League for thousands of hours, but Valorant I've only played like 100, so I figured they would make 2 solid examples. I'll share the results of each day at the end of the week so we can see how they all compare to each other. On day 2, I did something similar, but it was actually intervaled sprints. So sprint, rest for 15 minutes. Basically a more intense version of what I did on the previous day. I'm doing my best to keep everything else constant, so like my diet, what I'm having for breakfast and lunch and everything. But yeah, I'm gonna do this, head back, play some ranked, and see how it works. Whoops! This is probably the best time to tell you that there was actually a reason I was doing these specific exercises on each day. Basically, I wanted to test out moderate and intense aerobics and anaerobics because apparently they have different effects on the brain.
Aerobic is essentially when your body mostly uses oxygen to produce fuel, and that is stuff like running, that is a lot of cardio stuff. Anaerobic is something that is like short bursts of kind of intense exercise and often is using glycogen stores within the muscles as the main source of fuel. An anaerobic exercise would be weightlifting in most capacities.
That's Flow State, by the way, a sports psychology expert.
So I'm Flow State. I'm the sports psychology coach for Space Station Gaming.
So on these days, I've done moderate and intense aerobic exercise, and on the next 2, I'll be doing anaerobic exercise. On day 3 specifically, I decided to do yoga for my moderate anaerobic day. Unfortunately for me, I found this very boring. It wasn't easy though. I was pretty impressed by how difficult it was. So respect to all you yoga mains out there. The good thing though is that even though I thought it was boring and I didn't really enjoy it, that shouldn't actually make a difference. Back in that study I talked about earlier, another thing they measured was how much people enjoyed the exercise for those who did it. And they found that those who didn't enjoy it performed just as well afterward as the ones that did. So even if I absolutely dread what I'm doing, I should still get the same benefits. So that's great. It was at this point in the week where I started to think logically about how physical exercise could possibly affect your gaming performance. On one hand, there are 2 completely different categories that don't seem connected at all on the surface. Like, how could this possibly make a difference when I actually sit down at my computer and start playing? But on the other hand,
I think chess is probably the best example. There's a lot of top GMs that go by the phrase that you cannot be in peak mental shape without being in peak physical shape. The brain and body work together hand in hand, so we need to take care of both in order for both of them to work for us well. We know now, like scientifically speaking, that the brain is quicker, it learns faster, it's more at peace, it's more focused when the body is really healthy.
That makes like so much logical sense in my brain, but I've just never thought of it like that.
Yeah.
Day 4 was of course my intense anaerobic day. I really tried to push myself to my limit since this was the intense day. Took a short break between and then jumped in and played some rank. Originally, I had no idea that these different exercises have different mental effects on your brain. Exercise is exercise at the end of the day. At least that's what I was thinking about the mental side of it. But after talking with Flowstay, I realized just how big of a field this is. And as I was going through the week, it actually felt like I noticed some differences in focus levels and emotional states depending on what I did beforehand. So I found that interesting. Before I knew it, the week was up and I was on the final day. I decided to treat this day as like a control group where I just wouldn't do any exercise before and jump straight in. I don't really know how necessary it was because that's literally what I do all the time normally. So yeah, that turned out pretty much exactly how I expected it to, just a normal day of ranked. Had some good moments and some bad moments. I went 3-3 in Rocket League and 1-1 in Valorant, so pretty spot on. I'd rate this one a 5 out of 10 just to kind of set the baseline. This was an average day. Working back in time, let's talk about day 4. This was the intense anaerobic day. Honestly, I felt pretty good mentally after. I was just in general a bit more confident going into my matches before I even started playing. It's like it gave me a little bit of an ego, but in a non-toxic way.
A lot of times with heavy weightlifting especially, you'll see rises in testosterone, which can help with confidence and aggressiveness.
This right here actually seemed to line up pretty well. Looking back at how I played, I actually turned out to be just slightly more aggressive in my play style, which isn't normally how I play either game at all. I'm definitely more of a support player usually. The biggest downside though was that I was still pretty shaky afterwards since I went pretty hard in the exercise. In Rocket League, it didn't make too much of a difference because it's really just about your thumbs, but in Valorant, it totally did. My aim was just awful. I felt good mentally, but I didn't have the mechanics to hit my shots, so it ended up evening out in the end, and my record definitely showed that. I went 3-3 in Rocket League and 1-1 in Valorant. Overall, I'd also give this one a 5 out of 10. I felt confident, but didn't perform all that well because of the physical shakiness. Definitely not my favorite routine of the week. Now working back again to day 3, this was also an anaerobic day, but just with moderate intensity. This day turned out a bit better because I still got the benefits of the mental side of things, but I wasn't physically shaky. I even ranked up in Valorant on this day. Granted, it was to Silver 1, but remember, I'm trash at this game, so for me, this is actually notable. I was at the top of the lobby, I felt great while playing, and it just kind of snowballed from there. In Rocket League, it wasn't as big of a difference. I still played pretty well. That aggressiveness definitely applied here too. I would even go as far as to say I carried on some of the games, but on the ones where I didn't, they went really poorly. I went 3-3 in Rocket League and 2-0 in Valorant on this day. I'd rate this one a 7 out of 10, but it's still not my favorite.
So in general, one of the other benefits that we'll see from both types of exercise is that you're just reducing cortisol, which is the stress hormone, and you're just gonna feel better. You'll play better because you feel better, but you'll also be more confident.
This right here manifested itself the most around this time for me. Particularly on the aerobic days, I just felt at peace while I was playing. It's kind of hard to describe, but it was really just pleasant without taking away from the focused aspect of it. If anything, I was even more focused. For me personally, it felt like the exercise kind of belittled the importance of the gaming afterwards, but not necessarily in a bad way because I still took it just as seriously. I was still just like even more focused than normal, but there was so much less pressure in a way. A big thing to recognize with this whole thing is that my experiment has a sample size of 1, and that's me. So I can't guarantee my entire experience, positive or negative, is due specifically to this whole routine, but I do think I'm a pretty good test subject for this considering I'd otherwise be sitting at a computer making videos all day. So if there is a difference, it's likely because of the exercise. And I think it's safe to say that my feeling of being at peace while playing was largely due to what I was doing beforehand. Normally, I'd have some level of frustration when things aren't going my way, but on these days, there was hardly any of that. If anything, on day 2, I think the intervaled sprints were a bit too intense because I still had that fatigued feeling in my chest by the time I started playing, but it was overall a plus. I went 3-3 in Rocket League and 1-1 in Valorant, but the results don't really align with how I felt and how I personally performed. I played really well the whole time by my standards, popped off in Rocket League, popped off in Valorant, just didn't quite get the wins to show for it, and sometimes that's how it works. I'd still rate it an 8 out of 10, but still not my favorite. So it's the last day of the experiment, and I think I just realized why this basic routine works so well for me. And this isn't even something I considered beforehand, like I just realized this. No matter what exercise I do beforehand, I notice that I just enjoy playing these games more than I do normally. Like there's almost no level of frustration, there's no feeling of tilt or anything, like even when everything is stacked against me. I'm just playing games and having fun. And I think that encompasses the whole reason why I started performing better too. This turned into an entirely different video than I expected it to, but you know what? I'm glad it did. The moderate aerobic day encapsulated pretty much all the good things about any other exercise throughout the week. I felt physically comfortable by the time I sat down, but I still felt at peace while playing. It was the perfect balance for me. Like I got the exercise without pushing myself too hard. Rocket League went incredibly well. I went 5-1 1-1 and played so great. Valorant, I still played pretty well, but the results weren't there. But something even more remarkable happened in that session.
I had one game in Valorant where my teammates were literally whining the whole time, and I just didn't care for some reason. Like normally I'd just like get frustrated, like come on guys, but this time I was just like, I don't care. I'm just focusing on myself really.
This is an 8.5 out of 10 for me. Realistically, there weren't many massive differences in my state of mind between the days. There were some minor things, but for the most part, I was affected in pretty much the same way. It really just came down to which exercise had the least physical effect and most mental effect. And at the end of the week, I discovered that for me, it's simply a light 15-minute jog shortly before I get on to play some games. It's healthy, it makes you happier, you'll play better, and that's really all you could ask for.